Hello, all you wonderful people out there on the internet looking for ways to keep yourselves entertained as we try to fight our way through this quarantine. Here I am to talk about one such sort of entertainment, and thematically it's semi-appropriate as Easter Sunday is upon us. The Prince of Egypt. And I'm not just talking about the 1998 Academy Award-winning animated DreamWorks film that so happens to be one of my favorite films of all time, but if you haven't seen that one already, then go watch it right now. Seriously, it's a masterpiece. No force in heaven or on earth, see what I did there, can tell me otherwise. What I am referring to more specifically is the stage musical that it recently just spawned. Yes, in a modern age where it seems like just about everything and anything nostalgic can be made into a musical nowadays, be it The Karate Kid or Back to the Future, and in an age where certain animated films that some animation enthusiasts consider the underdogs, like Hunchback of Notre Dame and Anastasia, are finally getting some long-coveted transfers to stage, it seems like we're getting a ripple effect where other properties can be expanded into getting the same treatment. After the collaborative effort between Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz to successfully bring Hunchback to the stage, Menken went on to do a public theater production of Hercules that showed briefly last year in Central Park, and Schwartz went on to adapt The Prince of Egypt, first in the Silicon Valley Theater in California by the end of 2017, then at the Fredericia Theater in Denmark in the summer of 2018, the Tuacan Amphitheater in Utah later that same year, and at long last, opening just a little earlier this year on West End to glowing reviews. Well, mostly glowing. And while the current epidemic going around has forced the musical to close down only about a month into its premiere, and while I was not fortunate enough to take a trip to London to catch it during its run, a cast recording was just released and made available for download just 1 week prior to the time I'm uploading this. And now that I myself have just given the Prince of Egypt musical a listen, I'm here to give you my first impressions. Note, there will be spoilers ahead. The first and most obvious spoiler that I want to make abundantly clear is that I loved this soundtrack, and you have my full recommendation to give it a listen for yourself, and maybe make room on your playlist for it. But my purpose with this is just to give you a few ideas about what to expect. I'm also going to state right up front here that as I describe this, I'm going to assume that at this point you have seen the film. So with that, let's get into it. First off, yes, we do get the songs from the film, Deliver Us, All I Ever Wanted, Through Heaven's Eyes, When You Believe, they're all here. Well, okay, not quite all of them, but I'll get into that later. Starting with Deliver Us, this version of course is at a faster pace and with some slight alterations in the instrumentals, but it still stands just as strong as the film soundtrack. However, it does feature the first alteration from the original script when the Queen, upon drawing Moses from the river, is approached by Moses' sister Miriam. At least, I'm assuming it's Miriam right here based on all I have to go on, as it might allude to the part of the original biblical tale where she volunteers to fetch her adopted brother a nurse. She is the one to suggest that he be named Moses, meaning deliverance, as the Queen feels it appropriate for the baby being delivered to her, while for Miriam it has a personal meaning. Another change worth mentioning is the song All I Ever Wanted. Unlike the movie soundtrack, it doesn't fade when it gets to Moses' hieroglyph nightmare. Instead, the song continues into Moses coming upon the wall depicting Seni's mass genocide and discovering the truth, and continues to the next day into the Queen's lyrics in the song that we got in the movie. But throughout the duration of the song, Moses is consistently trying to remain in denial against the notion of being of Hebrew heritage. Now for some of the new songs. To avoid getting into too many spoilers, I'll just talk about ones of the first act, because for the most part, they will either be reprised in the second act, or they'll foreshadow some of the ones to come up for that one. The first newly added song is Faster, which is basically Moses and Ramesses up to their shenanigans and chariot racing, and is also the point where we are introduced to another notable character, the High Priest. Yes, just one High Priest, not the comedic duo like we get in the film. I bring him up because he will be the one to take note of what you listen to in the climax for the finale. The next one, and incidentally my favorite one, as well as the most promoted for the musical prior to its official runs, is Footprints in the Sand, which is Moses' I Want song of sorts. At first it might seem a bit counterintuitive to have an I Want song when Moses sings All I Ever Wanted, but this isn't the type of I Want song you typically expect. It's mostly a lament and self-contemplation where Moses ponders the possibility of leaving an imprint in history despite being overshadowed by Ramesses being heir to the throne. Obvious foreshadowing of what's to come later as well. After that is Zipporah's introduction song, Dance to the Day, which my first instinct to describe in one summation is basically equivalent to Esmeralda's Rhythm of the Tambourine. And after that is Make It Right, which Ramesses is trying to persuade Moses not to run out of Egypt after he ended up killing one of the slave-beating soldiers, and Moses reminding Ramesses that he can erase events that happened from scripture, but not from history. There's Never in a Million Years, a romance ballad between Moses and Zipporah after they marry. And the only other one worth mentioning for the first act is the Faster reprise, specifically because not only is it part of the soundtrack where Moses encounters God, which I'll talk more about in a bit, but also because it's the part where Ramesses is assuming the throne of the pharaoh while mourning the loss of his brother. And because it gives a significant role to the woman who becomes his queen. I bring her up because she does have a slightly more significant role in this version, especially by the second act, which I think is supposed to also allude, at least subconsciously, to the Ten Commandments, where she also plays a significant role. Now to address what I meant when I mentioned that this musical doesn't feature quite all of the film's songs proper. There is one that is all but completely exempt, and one that is written a bit differently. Playing with the Big Boys is a great song in the animated movie, and one that I feel deserves a spot on more Best Villain Songs lists. However, from what I heard about what Stephen Schwartz had to say, he thought it was too silly and out of place from the rest of the tone of the film, like Hunchback's A Guy Like You. I personally find the song to be more in veins of Whimsy Macabre, similar to The Court of Miracles, but that's just me. I do think Playing with the Big Boys is a good song, and I think there are ways it could have been reworked on to stage in a new format that wouldn't have made it at odds with the story, but I respect Schwartz's decisions. I will say that one part of the song, the chant of By the Power of Ra, Nut, Knu, Ptah, Nachmet, Neftius, Sakmet, all that, is featured as a prelude to The Plagues. And since it's come time to talk about that, I feel I should bring up here that it does have the same basic structure as its animated counterpart, but is written a bit differently. The choral chants, I send the pestilence and plague into your house, into your bed, and all that, are still prominent and evoke just as much emotion as ever, and they are even given some extensions and key changes that just to make them all the more blood-pumping. However, instead of All I Ever Wanted, the confrontation between the two brothers is replaced with a melodic reprise of Make It Right. But the All I Ever Wanted melody is reprised when Moses reconfronts his mother, his adopted mother, the queen, mind you, and she is appalled that the son she adopted is unleashing all this destruction and horror upon her kingdom. It really adds another layer of heartbreak to the real tragedy of the song. Overall, in spite of my personal attachment and familiarity to the original version of The Plagues, its composition for this version is a welcome change. If there is one part of the music that I am slightly disappointed at, it's the absence of the orchestral music for The Burning Bush that is featured at the start of the film and is frequently reprised throughout. But I can confidently say that it wasn't enough to deter my overall enjoyment, with the rest of the cast recording being as magnificent as it is. Basically, if I ever felt let down by any aspects of the soundtrack, there was always plenty else to make up for it. Now, while I don't want to spoil the ending, I will say that it does generally follow the same beats as the film and the biblical story, but it does take one unexpected turn when it comes to what Ramesses decides to ultimately do. While this might be a bit of a controversial depiction that clashes with the biblical legend, it doesn't offend me too much personally, as I know that so much in the Bible contradicts historical record as is, and also because history is already full of secrets about famous figures, and much of what's set in stone may turn out to be false anyways. Like Ramesses says, he can proclaim that day is night and it will be recorded. And since this already adapted version of the Exodus story admitted right up front to being fairly liberal with the story, historically and artistically, I should expect the same here. And as one who understands the need for some artistic license in a story and accepts it if the end product justifies it, I'm just assessing this version of Ramesses as a character. And as a character, I will say it does give Ramesses a nice development and gives a complete arc to his relationship with Moses, where their bond isn't completely decimated like it was at the end of the film. The singing and acting are all top-notch in this. Listing off the cast quickly, at least the ones listed in the song titles, you've got Luke Brady as Moses, Liam Tomney as Ramesses, Christina Lado as Zipporah, Alexia Kadime as Miriam, Gary Wilmot as Jethro of the Midian, Joe Dixon as Pharaoh Seti, Debbie Korup as Seti's queen, Tanisha Spring as Ramesses' queen, and Adam Pearce as the one high priest. I confess that I am rather unfamiliar with most of these actors, though I do hope to get more acquainted with who they are as I listen to them and hopefully hear what else they've ever been able to star in. The one exception that I already do know is the actress playing Moses' mother Yocheved, Mercedes Sampai. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, who previously played Esmeralda in the Stuttgart German production of the Hunchback World Tour. And it's here where I'd like to talk about the musical's portrayal of God, or more appropriately Yahweh, speaking to Moses. Rather than having this large, booming, echoing male voice like Val Kilmer's double voice role in the animated film, God's version in this comes in the form of chorus voices. I like that as it creates further ambiguity and mysticism of what God is, let alone who God is. Because it doesn't directly imply God as being a he or a she, God is just another sentient being beyond humans' comprehension. And yes, while the concept of religion does fascinate me, as I have taken a class in it in high school and I consider it one of my biggest eye-openers in my younger days, I don't consider myself to be especially religious. I would have to say I'm agnostic, if anything. But I do like to think of myself as spiritual in a way, as I do believe in the idea of something bigger than myself, bigger than my comprehension, and understanding it's not something I have to necessarily be afraid of. And I stand firm that you do not have to be religious to appreciate or even connect with this musical or the movie. Because like I said, the movie is one of my favorites. It helped strongly shape me into the person I am today, morally, artistically, and as far as my tastes in music go. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the Prince of Egypt musical cast recording, and I'm open to hearing your thoughts. What is your favorite song from the movie? What do you think of its arrangement for the musical, if it was featured in the first place? Do you have a favorite song that was written exclusively for the musical, if they made a big impression on you at all? Do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share with me? If so, by all means, go ahead in the comment section. And remember, wash your hands, get into healthy dietary habits to help support your immune system, practice social distancing, and keep in mind, you can get through this. You will get through this. You will, when you believe.